Hello, dear viewers, and welcome back to the channel that refuses to leave royal news as a two-line headline. Here, we pick up those headlines, turn them over in our hands, and show you the tiny engravings most people miss. Today's story begins on a July afternoon that started like any other in central London: tourists queuing for selfies outside Buckingham Palace, black cabs overheating in traffic, office workers hurrying toward happy hour. But a few streets away, down Marlborough Road and through an archway flanked by stone lions, something extraordinary gathered momentum behind the walls of St. James's Palace. Picture the inner courtyard first: Tudor brick glowing dusker red, a light breeze fluttering the royal banner, staff carrying clipboards while trying not to step on television cables snaking across ancient flagstones. Inside, the guard chamber smells faintly of beeswax polish and centuries-old oak. It is here King Charles III, 76 years old, battling cancer yet determined not to be defined by it, arrives, not to host a state banquet or receive ambassadors, but to tackle a wound that cuts through Britain's younger generation: knife crime, hopelessness, the feeling that tomorrow will be worse than today. In his wake comes Idris Elba, the very definition of Hollywood cool, yet suddenly humble as he glances at the gilded ceiling and whispers to an aide, "The last time I stepped into this building I was still hustling for gigs." From that single remark you already sense the central message of the summit: your starting point does not have to decide your finish line. Charles has believed this since 1976, the year he launched the Prince's Trust with nothing more glamorous than a handful of demob funds from the Royal Navy and a pocketful of frustration at youth unemployment. 48 years later the trust has helped nearly 1 million people, but the king is not about to take a victory lap. Instead, he invites teenagers from Croydon, Manchester, Birmingham and Bristol, kids who crossed metal detectors that very morning before catching early trains, to sit literally shoulder to shoulder with cabinet ministers, tech billionaires, and A-list actors. If the system feels stacked against you, Charles likes to say, then my job is to tilt the board until the game is fair. The doors close, the hum of outside London fades, and the summit begins not with a speech, but with a moment of quiet. Charles asks everyone to look at the grand chandelier overhead. He tells them it has hung there since George IV, through wars, coronations, blackouts, and COVID lockdowns. Survival, he says, requires adaptation, not stasis. Let that be our conversation today. Ice broken, he hands the floor to Idris. Elba starts not with his resume but with a photograph: a skinny 16-year-old Idrissa holding headphones twice the size of his head in a Hackney youth club that no longer exists. "That room saved me," he says, "because outside it someone carried a knife the night before and someone else carried a grudge that never got settled. Inside, beats were louder than blades." The trust paid the rent on that club for 12 more months and, in his words, gave East London a soundtrack no gang could drown out. When he finishes, a teenager in the second row, Chloe from Peckham, blazer too big, ambition even bigger, shoots her hand up and asks how he dealt with naysayers who laughed at his dream. Idris grins, "I let them laugh. Dreams are private elevators, not everyone fits inside." Now comes the king's announcement: Creative Futures. 12 weeks of immersive training in music production, film editing, podcast storytelling, fashion styling, digital animation, stage lighting, skills that can turn pocket money into invoices and SoundCloud links into careers. Each student graduates not just with a certificate but with a mentor who stays for a full year. Each cohort receives mental health support, because trauma and creativity are uneasy roommates. Before the cameras, these promises almost shimmer. The bigger test is after the cameras leave. To demonstrate accountability, Charles invites Kyle, a 22-year-old Royal Marines reservist, to speak. Kyle pulls up his right sleeve and shows faint knife scars along his forearm. "I got these protecting a friend outside a chicken shop. I stayed alive because paramedics arrived in 5 minutes." Many don't get 5 minutes. The room listens, stunned, as he describes finding discipline in the boxing ring, then brotherhood in the Marines, then purpose coaching local youth. "If you throw me a microphone," he says, "I'll rap those kids an exit route from gangs quicker than any lecture." Charles writes something on his notebook. Someone later glimpses the words microphone outreach underlined 3 times. Then the numbers hit. A criminologist outlines the economic cost of youth violence: £3 billion per year. The Home Secretary winces slightly. This is her department's ledger after all, then promises pilot funding for Saturday creative schools. The Education Secretary nods and adds that BTEC qualifications tied to art skills might become more common. Homework, in other words, for ministries that normally speak in silos. From the back row someone mutters, "Let's see if they chase the paperwork," and everyone knows follow-through is often where good ideas come to die. The personal stories keep rolling. A doctor from King's College Hospital recounts treating a 15-year-old with 7 stab wounds. She remembers his shaking hands, his apology for ruining her evening. "He thought of me before himself," she says. "That's how young he was." A teacher from Birmingham describes confiscating homemade knives fashioned from pencil sharpeners. An ex-gang member, now a photographer, confesses the first time he felt real power was printing his own picture in a darkroom. Each story is a brick in the case the king now builds. That hope is cheaper than hospital beds and more effective than longer sentences. When Charles finally rises to close, he doesn't lecture. He talks about planting trees. "The best time is 30 years ago, the second best time is now." Creative Futures, he explains, is not charity. It is reinvestment in soil that grows the kingdom's future engineers, composers, entrepreneurs, maybe even a future monarch's advisor. "Imagine a Britain," he says, "where the loudest sound outside a youth club is applause." He thanks everyone, reminds the teenagers they are co-authors of this program, and steps away from the lectern. Outside, news crews pounce. Headlines race each other online. Charles teams with Idris to tackle knife crime. King pledges £10 million to Youth Arts Blitz. Radio phone-ines light up. Some callers say art can't feed families. Others argue a rap mic costs less than a funeral. Twitter debate rages, but in living rooms from Newcastle to Newquay parents quietly Google Prince's trust courses near me. And that, viewers, is impact before a single beat drops. What happens next? In 4 weeks applications open. In October the first laptops buzz alive in a Birmingham warehouse repurposed as a pop-up studio. Anxious teens will step through its doors, and mentors will greet them by name, not by postcode stereotype. 6 months later, independent researchers will publish retention numbers, dropout reasons, and first job placements, names changed, dignity intact. If the data does not satisfy the king, insiders say he'll tweak the formula, call new partners, try again. Because for Charles, the difference between a project and a crusade is persistence. He will need that persistence. Doctors whisper about chemo fatigue, court diaries adjust around treatment cycles, yet he keeps these youth sessions in the non-negotiable column. Why? Perhaps because he knows the monarchy's future relevance is measured not in coronets but in changed lives. Or perhaps because, like any grandfather, he wants Britain to treat its children better than statistics predict. So, dear viewers, here's our takeaway. Inside one of Britain's oldest palaces, the Crown and the streets shared a room. They spoke the same language: dreams, chances, beats, and agreed on one urgent refrain: hopelessness is not inevitable. Whether Creative Futures becomes a footnote or a landmark will depend on money, mentorship, and a public that keeps watching long after the press release fades. And we will be here, following every step, every beat drop, every data point. If this expanded narrative helped you feel the pulse behind the protocol, hit that like button so the algorithm knows hope-fueled stories matter. Comment below: can creativity outgun gang status where you live? Should taxpayers bankroll drum machines if they cut crime? We want your honest takes. And of course, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss our next Royal Deep Dive. Until then, keep your dreams loud and your cynicism on mute. Good night from St. James's Palace and from a king who refuses to let despair write Britain's soundtrack.